Hey guys, welcome to Yesterday's Coffee, the podcast where we chat about fitness, nutrition, and business all over coffee that may or may not have been brewed yesterday. Today's topic of discussion is cholesterol. So this is something that is kind of just in the back of everyone's mind, that there is a certain negative to cholesterol. It's just seen as this really big bad thing.
Everyone's terrified of
Yeah,
it.
yeah. It's like whatever you do, avoid cholesterol at all costs. And there's a number of reasons why that kind of became the frame of mind for most people. But what we're going to discuss today is what cholesterol actually is, what it does, and why it's not such an evil thing after all.
No, cholesterol is great.
Yeah.
It plays a really important role. It's kind of like the whole cortisol thing. People are so afraid of cortisol,
Yep.
or, now people are so afraid, they want to control their blood sugars. They think, sugar and carbs are bad. Everything has its place and everything has a reason, and your body needs all of these things to a certain extent. So you need to stop being crazy about cholesterol.
Mm-hmm.
So cholesterol itself is a fat. We know that, right? We know it's a lipid. It's a fat. So cholesterol is needed for a lot of different things, really, really important things inside the body. Cholesterol is actually the precursor to I shouldn't say all, but most of your hormones. So all of your steroid hormones, all of your sex hormones, the hormones that regulate fluid balance in your body, the hormones that regulate carbohydrate metabolism in your body, vitamin D production, right?
Yep.
Am I missing anything?
No, that's pretty much it. Cholesterol is actually a steroid. And
No, it's not.
steroid hormone, yeah, it is.
No, it's not. Cholesterol makes steroids.
It's a precursor.
It's a precursor.
So it's a precursor to a steroid. What I meant to say is steroids.
So all steroids are cholesterol, but not cholesterol.
Yeah.
Not all cholesterol becomes steroids.
Correct.
Yes.
All steroids are cholesterol.
Yes.
Are a derivative of cholesterol.
So cholesterol basically builds, like we said, all of your steroid hormones.
So
right?
it's very important. And so obviously, and we've talked a little bit about different hormones in past episodes, obviously these have major implications for processes in the body.
Yeah.
And so given that cholesterol is the precursor to all of these, it is vital. We have to have it.
We have to, 100% you need it.
And so in addition to hormone production, another major part of why cholesterol is so important is the integrity of a cell. It makes up about 30% of a cell membrane, and the waxiness of it and the shape that it gives cells, it allows cells to be flexible for movement. And so that's why cholesterol is only found in animals, humans, living creatures. It's not found in plants.
No, plants need to be rigid, which is why you see more fiber and more cellulose in those things.
Right.
And the human body doesn't have cellulose.
Exactly.
So our version of cellulose, or the thing that keeps a plant together, would be cholesterol, which gives all of our cells flexibility and manipulability. I don't know how you say it.
Yeah. And so the final part that cholesterol plays is in cell signaling. So sending an impulse from the brain to a working muscle, it's involved in the composition of the myelin sheath, which is what surrounds that motor neuron, taking you back to physiology here.
Yeah.
And sending that nerve impulse from brain to muscle, the more myelinated that neuron is, the faster the impulse, the more effective the signal.
Yeah. So basically it just makes you quick.
Yeah.
So we know, and I think we've talked about it before, that your brain is made mostly of fat, and that kind of relates to this. So we've also talked about how the quality of fats that you eat improves your brain function overall.
Yep.
So that kind of all connects in that way. But not all cholesterol is the same.
Correct.
So there are different types, which most people are familiar with as being good cholesterol and bad cholesterol.
Yes.
But those terms are not entirely accurate.
They're misnomers to an extent, yeah.
They're not the best way to describe, but for the average person, that's, how doctors will describe it.
Sure.
That's how everybody will talk about it.
So let's talk about the bad stuff first.
Right, the bad stuff.
Yeah.
So your LDL cholesterol, right,
Yes.
would be what people typically consider to be the bad cholesterol. But again, just like we just talked about, you need cholesterol to a certain point, and every single type of cholesterol plays a different role.
Yeah.
So your LDL cholesterol is mostly responsible for shuttling cholesterol to the areas and tissues where the body needs it the most.
Mm-hmm.
So when people get really worried about this bad cholesterol building up on the sides of their arteries, usually what's really happening there is your body's responding to a source of inflammation,
yes,
which we can talk about a little bit later. But that inflammation triggers the response that asks your body to send repair materials,
exactly.
one of which being the LDL cholesterol.
Right.
So the LDL cholesterol comes in, patches up the hole, and what happens is if there's chronic inflammation and all this damage happening over time, your body is it just keeps sticking that LDL on top of each other, which is why you have partially blocked arteries and why people have to have, bypass surgeries.
Right.
But there are, actually different types of LDL cholesterol. So if your body has less inflammation or less of a need for this like really dense, sticky repair material, then most of your LDL cholesterol will be just kind of like this big bouncy LDL material.
Yeah.
It gets the LDL where it needs to go, but it's not really sticking to anything and it runs through your arteries just fine.
Right. Yeah.
If you have a lot of, like I just said, chronic inflammation and damage being done to the arteries not from the cholesterol itself. The cholesterol is not causing the damage. The cholesterol is responding to damage.
That is the biggest key to this whole thing.
Yes.
And people are so afraid of cholesterol, thinking it's this big bad thing, when the fact of the matter is, if you have elevated cholesterol levels, that means there is damage there that the cholesterol is working to repair.
Exactly.
And so the cholesterol is not the root cause of this issue. The cholesterol is the body's response to the issue.
Yes, absolutely. So again, if you get a cholesterol or like a lipid panel done and your LDL is high, okay, there's two things you should look at. You should probably examine the ratio of that big bouncy type of LDL to the small dense type of LDL. And then you should also take a look at, anything else that might be causing this chronic inflammation, whether that's a bad diet or stress or toxin exposure, whatever that happens to be,
Right.
Because you need to identify the real cause. It's one thing for us to tell you to eat more fiber and eat more healthy fat, which can improve your lipid levels over time.
Mm-hmm.
But if we don't really ever focus on taking out that cause of your inflammation or that trigger, then that's just an uphill battle for you.
Right.
You're going to have to keep thinking about healthy fats for the rest of your life versus just being able to kind of focus on food quality or focus on enjoyability. You know what I mean?
Right.
Those other things.
Yeah. So just to kind of reiterate all that, because we're throwing a lot at you, LDL, low density lipoprotein cholesterol, deemed as the bad cholesterol,
but it's not.
Has a purpose. It is there to send cholesterol where it is needed. So whether that's patching up a damaged area, improving cell membrane health, or being sent for production of hormones, like we said, that is the purpose of LDL. So you don't want zero LDL.
You need
But
you need cholesterol.
Need LDL. It's typically recommended that you want less than 100 milligrams per deciliter. So as an LDL target. And that's pretty good advice to follow. But it's by no means this big evil thing. It serves a purpose. And if there is elevated levels in the bloodstream, it means there's some sort of other issue causing that damage.
Definitely. And some of them are genetic. Like there is like familial or genetic based lipid issues or cholesterol issues. But the other thing too is if you find that you're above that 100 milligrams per deciliter mark, that lab value, that's kind of what I was saying is maybe reevaluate that to see what type of LDL we're looking at.
Right.
Because just because you have a little elevation, but they're all the pretty healthy LDLs, maybe that just means that you're in a period of time where you're building some more hormones or you're, something is happening inside your body that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you find that most of that LDL is the small, dense, sticky kind, then that's something to examine a little bit further.
Yeah, it's said that under 100 would be considered ideal. The 100 to 129 range is typically that spot where if you're healthy and like you said, it's got the good composition of LDLs, there's absolutely nothing to worry about there.
Yeah.
As you start going above that, that's where things start to be a little dicier. But it's just something to kind of keep track of and begin to understand the difference between those.
Yeah. It's important to know, too, that your normal lipid panel will not show you what type of LDL you have.
Right.
So that's something that you would have to ask your doctor to take a different lipid panel for you.
And most basic lipid panels actually don't directly measure LDL. So what they do is they directly measure HDL, and then they subtract
total cholesterol.
And they measure total cholesterol, and so they take total cholesterol minus HDL, and then LDL, and there's another one, VLDL, which is very low density lipoprotein, is derived through a calculation where that remainder is both LDL and then VLDL. They actually divide by 5 of what's left to get what that is.
Got it.
So unless you're getting a very specific test done, the LDL is actually approximated. So just know that going in. So now let's talk about the good stuff.
HDL, the good stuff.
HDL.
So your HDL cholesterol is kind of like the recycling HDL.
Yeah.
So HDL picks up other excess cholesterols throughout the body and takes them back to the liver to be recycled or excreted. So anything that you don't need or any waste products from the cholesterol or from the synthesis process get flushed out or reused and repackaged into other LDLs to go back into the body and do what they need to do.
Exactly.
So that's why it's always recommended for you to get more HDL, because if your LDLs are elevated and you focus on improving your HDL ratio, then you have more of that HDL to pull more of that LDL out of the system.
Right.
So...
And HDL is interesting because it's the opposite from a health perspective. So whereas LDL gets demonized for if you have too much of it, HDL, we basically want as much as we can get. And there's actually, the risk factor is actually if you have a low HDL level because, again, you don't have enough of the high-density lipoproteins going through the system and picking up all of the LDLs that aren't needed. And so the recommended range for that is if you can get over 60 milligrams per deciliter, you're actually in what's considered a negative risk factor range, which is where...
So this is actually not 100% true.
What, did they change this?
So what we typically look for is a value over 50, not necessarily 60.
Well, so 60 is the negative risk factor.
Sure. But actually, there is, what's that called?
Bell curve?
Yes. So it's only valuable up to a certain point, and then when your HDL gets too high, it's actually a risk factor. It's actually worse.
Well, yeah, because then,
it means that there's excess inflammation in the body.
Right. So you're getting to that point where you're actually clearing too much of it. There would be a reason that elevated levels get to that.
Yeah. So I think they say over 85 or 90.
Right. I mean, that would be crazy high.
Mine's been that high before.
Has it really?
Yeah. Well, I tested at Lifetime, so I don't know how accurate. I don't know if it was accurate, but it scared me, though. I had to look it up. At first, I thought I was doing really good. I was like, oh, yeah. I have some good HDL. And then I looked it up, and they're like, yeah, value's over. It was like 99 or something.
I hadn't actually heard of that. But so
no, I saw. But again, I don't know if it was accurate. I did a finger prick.
So again, to try to simplify this.
Sorry.
So under 40 is bad. You don't want less than 40 milligrams
I would say you want
deciliter.
Between 40 and 70. I would say between 40 and, 50 and 70. Let's say that. Yeah.
Yeah. In the 40s, you're on the low end. 40 to less than 60 is considered fairly low.
But a value of 50 would be good.
50 to 60, I wouldn't worry about it. 70, wouldn't worry about it. That'd be really good.
If it was above 70, I might actually take a deeper look at it.
Yeah, I mean, we made this way more complicated than we needed to, but...
You put all these numbers on here, by the way.
Right, but so 60 was typically what you were trying to shoot for. It's kind of like the gold standard there. Yeah, if you get too high, it's bad. It goes for anything in your body, so it's not indefinite as far as that goes, but... At the end of the day, HDL is good. It's recycling all the rest of the unused cholesterol, the plaque buildup, all that stuff. It helps clear it out of the system.
Yeah.
Brings it back to the liver, lets it get metabolized or excreted. And so those are the components of your total cholesterol, which is another number that you'll hear a lot of, especially at a doctor's office, is your total cholesterol.
Which your total cholesterol doesn't even mean anything.
Right. And that's the next point that I wanted to bring up is total cholesterol is the most meaningless number in the world because it doesn't tell us.
They need to take it because that's you said before, like that's how they calculate the
Right.
LDL.
That's
but for you, the person looking at the total cholesterol, and for them to be like, oh, your total cholesterol's high, like you need to work on that.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything. Because again, if you have a good portion of LDL and maybe your HDL is like a little on the high side, not that high, but higher, it can actually make your total cholesterol.
Have to double check you on that after this just to make sure you're right. The high HDLs.
Yeah, they're bad. I looked it up.
I
was worried about myself.
I'm just saying.
I was like, oh, I wonder what a 99 HDL means, and I looked it up, and they were like, oh, like it's a problem.
All I said is I'm going to check.
There's a lot of bad stuff happening to your body, and I was like, oh, well, okay, got to fix something.
If that's the case, I need to brush up on my cholesterol knowledge. But anyways.
Yeah, I mean, I studied it for a long time.
Yeah,
so.
I know you did. So now. This kind of brings us to the whole thing of like, all right, so this is blood cholesterol. This is what comprises all of it, HDL, LDLs. Now, what about cholesterol in food, right? Because you've got
because people try to avoid it. They're like, oh, I can't eat egg yolks because I can't have cholesterol. Right, yeah, or like beef, I can't have cholesterol.
So what's the story with all this?
So your body produces cholesterol on its own. You don't have any basic need for dietary cholesterol.
Right. Your body can produce everything it needs.
However, taking dietary cholesterol in isn't necessarily a bad thing because it has relatively little impact on your blood cholesterol levels.
Right. So your body produces everything that it needs. Any cholesterol that you consume is actually really poorly absorbed. Hardly anything gets into your system. And then any amount that actually comes into the system is then your body then compensates by downregulating its own production. Mm-hmm. So you end up with basically a net zero where there's not really any sort of change. There might be a super negligible amount, but at the end of the day, consuming a bunch of cholesterol isn't really going to change your blood cholesterol levels. Because what we were talking about before is that the cholesterol is not the issue. It's not that you have high cholesterol because you're consuming a lot of cholesterol. It's because you have some sort of damage caused by inflammation, caused by free radical buildup from some sort of component of your life and lifestyle that is causing that cholesterol production to increase and go to that damaged site.
Exactly. And we argued before this. I've never heard it explained this way. But it does make sense. I'll admit it. It makes sense now that my brain has processed it in saying
we got a little heated.
Because here's the thing, like the recommendation to improve your cholesterol ratio is to boost your intake of healthier fats to promote a higher HDL level.
Right. And I actually recommend that myself. So that's
what everybody recommends. And that's what all the research recommends. So everybody recommends that. So I was having a really hard time thinking, like, okay, if your body doesn't absorb any of the cholesterol, how does it impact and things like that? But I guess it makes sense if you're taking in sources that, for one, promote more inflammation, your body is going to have more LDL floating around, right? But for two, if you're taking in lower quality fat sources or poor fat sources that are causing that spike in the LDL. Wait, maybe I'm thinking, are these both the same? These are both going to be the same thing that I'm thinking of.
Right. So if you're eating foods that are lower quality, highly processed, create more inflammation, create more free radical buildup.
Creating the need for more LDL, meaning higher LDL levels.
Right, because again, LDL is produced as a response to arterial damage.
Yeah.
If the damage is there, which is caused from the inflammation, then LDL spikes because that's the body's response to recover from that. So if
you have lots coming in externally through the diet, your body stops producing its own, meaning it's producing less HDL, so that overall your ratio of LDL, because you have some coming in through your diet, goes up, HDL goes down. Is that the right way to think about it?
Well, so it's literally just about the food that's causing the inflammatory response. So
that's the only thing? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So because like this says, and the reason why this is so confusing is because most doctors actually still subscribe to the thought that there's a direct link between dietary cholesterol intake and atherosclerosis, as well as cardiovascular disease.
Yeah. I think this really just all comes back to our whole underlying theme of basically every episode, that quality of food matters and that you should pay attention to the quality of your food.
Yeah, 100%. And so to piggyback on that point, a meta-analysis, so looking at all the research conducted on cholesterol and CVD, atherosclerosis, in 2014 was done, and they found no sufficient evidence to support recommendations of low saturated fat diets, low consumption of cholesterol being better for you in those situations. So, so there is no actual scientifically backed link there. It's, again, this goes, and we're getting way off topic here, but this goes, this all goes back to that lipid hypothesis that we talked about. I think we talked about it at some point.
Yeah, a little while ago.
In how this whole anti-fat, anti-cholesterol mindset came to be back in the 50s. This is still the kind of trickle-down effect from that. And so even up to this point where we've had countless studies basically saying that there is no connection there. There's no connection to you eating these eggs and then getting high cholesterol. It's still on the forefront of people's minds when they think of that. And so just to reiterate, when you consume cholesterol, your body is going to compensate. So it's not going to produce as much. It's already producing enough as it is. If you consume any, then the natural amount of cholesterol that it would be producing is actually downregulated so that you've got that net zero effect.
Yeah.
So cholesterol levels aren't changing.
This is something that helps to prove that point, is if dietary intake of cholesterol had that big of an impact, then why does physical activity improve your cholesterol levels?
Right.
We know that physical activity can have anti-inflammatory effects overall. So it comes back to that inflammation versus like just the cholesterol issue.
Right.
Itself.
Cholesterol is not the issue. It's
because that is in research too. Like that's been proven.
Yeah.
Working out helps to regulate your cholesterol levels.
Right.
Well, why would that even work at all if dietary cholesterol intake was the only factor that affects your internal cholesterol levels?
Right. Yeah.
So there you go.
If you've got the two groups that are holding cholesterol constant, one's not working out and the other is working out, and the group that's working out improves their cholesterol levels, then you know that's
which they've done that. We know that.
Exactly.
They've studied that. That's proven.
So get it out of your head that these whole eggs are bad. The yolk is so freaking nutritious.
The yolk is so nutrient dense. You've got vitamin D. You've got cholesterol, but not necessarily bad for you cholesterol, right? So you've got other vitamins and minerals, B vitamins. If it's a good quality egg, you have omega-3s.
Vitamin D.
Yeah, I said that one.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
I'm still here.
So I promise. The egg yolks are, and what do you get from the white? Very little. You get protein.
You get a great protein source.
No, it's a great protein source. But in terms of like nutrients,
the yolk is there. So don't
the yolk
be
is the better
of it.
part.
Eat it.
You should eat it. Well, and what we found is like people who are trying to cut out all these sources of cholesterol are typically cutting way too low on their fats, and then they have issues with hormone production, especially women. So then you like create this whole thing where you were trying to be healthy and make a healthy choice, but we've proven that you need cholesterol.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that proves you need cholesterol. Otherwise,
there's actually evidence that shows that certain populations of people with different diseases, be it cancer or heart disease or some other things, actually tend to have lower levels of cholesterol. Yeah. So
interesting.
Again, there's
kind of makes sense to me because again, cholesterol is needed to make vitamin D, which is a really good
it's cell integrity
immune booster.
Too. Like cell integrity, and you think of that in the aging process and everything else, and so those levels start to decline. There's a lot of different things that can fail when the cell integrity fails.
True, absolutely.
So yeah, I hope you guys were able to hang on to that because we threw a lot.
It was a lot of information, but you know, everybody already knows good cholesterol, bad cholesterol. You know what I mean? I think this was helpful.
They think they do. They think they know it. So, yeah. Hopefully
now
that cleared it up. Now you should know it. Don't be afraid of cholesterol. Don't be afraid of your eggs. eat them.
Eat the egg
and
yolks.
Enjoy it. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you've got anything you'd like us to cover in the future, feel free to reach out to myself at hypertrofit.com. You can find Alexa at therootedrd.com. And we will see you guys again next week.
We will see you next week.